me throw some mutes down. All right. So for those of you who don't know, this is Zach, and Zach's pretty much a rock star. Going to talk about certifying his students. Zach is from the Riverside Military Academy, and that's all I'm giving you, Z. So you got to introduce yourself more than that. And I'm here. And if you have questions, whatever, throw them in the chat. Zach will keep an eye out. If he misses it, then I will flag him down. So it's your show, bud.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Hey, everybody. Good morning. My name is Zach Garrett. Hey, if y'all could take a moment and throw in the chat kind of your name and what school you're from, and if your program has a name, like our school's program has the Eagle News Network. So if your school is a program, a school name, just throw it in the chat. So when we save the chat, we can kind of have a group to connect with. So just your name and your school. Throw it in the chat. And we're going to let people do that here. Awesome. Great. It's always good to have people to connect with after. So I'm going to let you throw that in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to, I guess, share my screen here. Got something. Let me see. Okay. Okay, hold on just a second. Let me get this. Okay. All right, can we all see the screen? We all good? Everybody can see it? All right, great. Okay, so we're just gonna kind of go through this a little bit. The main thing we're gonna talk about today is certifying your students. And so what this is it's a great tool to kind of incentivize the training process of the beginning of your class. Like those first 3 weeks when you get your students in, what does that look like? Because I feel like for me, it really helped me streamline the rest of my year if I got those first 3 weeks down. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go move on to the next piece here. So here's some of the things we're going to talk about today. Just some safety and equipment training, like what exactly does that look like for us? Working towards certification, the certification exam, and then once they're certified, then what happens? And of course, recertification for your students so they always stay current on what's going on. Then we'll have a short Q&A. I don't anticipate my presentation taking an hour, but we can stay here for the full hour and do some Q&A at the end. But I appreciate your time with us today. So first is safety and equipment training. What does it look like for you? So I'm going to give us a chance. We're going to start interactive here. If we could go to menti.com here and type in this code. Okay. Go to menti.com and type in that code on your phone or on your computer. And I'm going to switch tabs here. Okay. I know the code just went away. Give me a second. I gotta. Okay. The question we'll be asking you is what kind of trainings do you run for your class? And so there's that code right there, 604496, menti.com. Go ahead and just type in there, what kind of trainings do you do in the beginning of your class? Like do you do camera training, tripod? I mean, what are some of the things that you hope to accomplish or you've already been accomplishing? Go ahead and type those in there and send them in. And this word cloud will sort of populate with what you all do. Because it's good for us to kind of get on the same page. And so I'm going to do it as well on my phone. And as they come in, the larger ones are the ones that people are doing more of, right? So more people are doing that particular training. So I'm going to go ahead and type in the code as well. Awesome. So it looks like we do a lot of training here in the beginning. And these are a lot of great topics that we do. Looks like safety is a big one, camera training, news writing, storyboarding. That's awesome. Safe set. I like it. Equipment checkout. Man, that's a big one. Content creation. Okay. So again, if you're just joining us, we're going to menti.com, typing in that code, and just giving us what kind of trainings do you run at the beginning of your school year, or maybe throughout your school year. But what are the main things that your students need to know to be successful? We're going to wait just another minute or so, and then we'll jump on to the next piece. Looks like we have some really good topics here. And I'll take a screenshot of this, and I can share it wherever you want. It's just good to know what other people do, because sometimes we might feel like we miss things. All right. I think everybody's good with that. Okay. So, awesome. Great stuff. I'm going to go ahead and go back to this topic here. So here's some things that, just some ideas when you're thinking about your trainings at the beginning of the year, those first 3 weeks. Here's some ideas I want you to keep in mind. Keeping those trainings short and interactive will allow your students to remain engaged. We know that we're all not sort of a lecture-based class, or more of a hands-on employability, working type class. But we do have times where lecture is required, where we have to sort of deliver that information. And so how do you think about how much lecture you're putting into versus how much time you're giving them to actually demo the whatever you're trying to do. You know, from Riverside Military Academy, so we like to use acronyms a lot. SOP is one thing we use for standard operating procedures. Kind of what is the process? What's the procedure for each device, right? If you check out a camera to a student, think about what do you want them to know or to be able to know, and just imagine they've never held a camera before, because I'm sure y'all know that when you handed them that camera and then you handed them a tripod, they started spinning that camera like a merry-go-round on top to try to get it on the tripod, and your heart just sort of sank there for a minute because you're imagining all that money that you just spent when it drops. So good thing to keep in mind. And then also check for understanding through demonstration. So what that means, we said that earlier, but when you train a student on doing something, don't just assume they know it, right? You have to actually check to make sure they understood by a demonstration. So have that student demonstrate it in front of you, because that's a safe space where they can make a mistake and you can actually guide them, versus them being out in the field. They make a mistake, it's in production, it's in front of everybody, it's in front of your talent, and you don't want that to happen. So let's talk about working towards certification. You know, what I did in my class was I took sort of that first 3 weeks, that training period that always seemed just kind of grueling and we had to get through it, and I sort of branded it as certification. The only certification they get is from me. It is a digital little sheet they get, and it's a graded item in their grade book. And so that's the only sort of certification they get. But what I tell them constantly during that first 3 weeks is that once you're certified, you'll be able to do this. Once you're certified. So I reinforce that certification is the only way to get through this training. It's the only way to begin. It's the only way to begin working on those real projects that they want to work on. So we want to give the students a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Because at the beginning, those first 3 weeks, they're also trying to figure out add drop, right? Trying to figure out, are they staying in your class? Are they going to some other career tech? Are they moving to a fine arts class? So you want to engage them by saying, hey, these first 3 weeks are going to be training based, but at the end, you'll be certified. So let's talk about what that certification requires. And I've created these forms for us. And so I'm going to go through them here really quick. I'm going to go to the AVTF one. And Tom, I guess I could share the window, right? But the tab might be a little better. I don't know. What do you think? I have a few tabs. Let me see here.
I found that going tab to tab actually is a little quicker, because then you can stop the share pretty easily with just a click at the top.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so I'm sharing this. Everybody can see that Riverside Castle coming in there. Awesome. So this is sort of document that I created to kind of keep us on track on all the items that they need to know by the certification exams the first 3 weeks. And so I can make this available for you so you can see it, but if you can kind of read some of those competencies in there. And these are obviously completely customizable to what you and your program does. For us, we use a Mac, we use Final Cut Pro for our interface. And so we spend some time learning about the Mac and learning about Final Cut Pro. We talk about audio, lighting, and camera setup and operation, safety and production. And so these, if you think about these as sort of lesson topics, it might take a day. Some of these take a day, and some of them take maybe 2 days. And then the safety and production is a day sort of at the end of all that. Safety is, of course, interwoven into all of these things. I tell my students, safety goes 2 ways. Safety goes to you as a student, as a worker on the team, and also with the equipment. The equipment needs to remain safe as well. So something to keep in mind there when you're thinking about certification. And then, of course, at the end, you have a certification exam that sort of solidifies their knowledge base, their knowledge understanding of all these competencies. And this date column here is for you, basically, to kind of keep track of when you issue that certification. So, for example, if you do an entire class, right, you do Mac Basics one day and you get that done with an entire section, I would just type in that little date column, AVTF1 second period on August 2nd, we finished Mac Basics, right? So that sort of keeps you on track. You can print this out if a student wants it. I just make it available on Google Docs or Google Classroom for them to review and to keep in mind as we go through all this. So this is their light at the end of the tunnel. Does that make sense? Any sort of initial questions on this or anything we've got? Were you looking at monitoring the chat, Tom, or they can ask questions whenever?
Hey, Zach, a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, awesome. No, I was just looking at this here, and like, for example, the Mac Basics, when you're talking about the interface essentials, do you, and you may be breaking this down a little bit more in the next couple slides here, but is there like a sheet where you have the minimum, you say, okay, I know, for example, for me, I want to start them in the editing process sooner this fall with stock footage and things. Do you have just like, here's the basic things you need to be able to do, import your footage, put it on the timeline, show me how to make a couple cuts, put some music to it, and that kind of thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So like sort of under the topic, like what are the subtopics to achieve that topic? Yeah, I have them. They're not as pretty on this sheet. They're sort of on my notes written down, but I was planning on cleaning it up a little bit this summer. But once I did, I was going to put them on that document as sort of sub pieces there. You can reach out to me on once I finish that, and I can post it as well. But yeah, that's important. I think what's important for us to all to know is that based on our classes and how we run our courses, we might decide that editing is important in the beginning versus maybe camera operation. I know that for me, that's actually something, David, that I've been thinking about is how can I get them editing faster? Because that once they start editing, they're going to get better and better. And the camera operation piece can really come later, which actually before I was doing camera first. So that's a good idea to keep that in mind. I'll make it more detailed once we go along here. All right, awesome. And so just so we know, I'm going to stop this piece here, and I'm going to show you the others. So if those of us that run a news show, I do the same thing for my news show, but as you can see, it's 2 columns here. And so this is for the Eagle News Network. And so you can kind of see everything on the right is it's very similar. There's some other stuff in here. Professional courtesy is big. Everything on the left, though, as you see, is basically all the breakdown of the show, because they have to be certified. They have to understand how the show operates. And so everything from segment creation to understanding the roles, avoiding copyright issues. And so these are all things that they do. And then, of course, once they're finished and they're certified, if any of them want the official document that says they're certified, I will sign it and print it out for them and make it look really nice. But this is just something that I do for them. So you can see the news show piece is a little more detailed. Does anybody have any questions about that? Good? Okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to the presentation. And
I have a quick question.
Yeah, what you got?
So that's one certification, is not a certification for each subject. Is that what that is?
Say that. What do you mean by that?
So on there is one cert. So the first one you showed, that was one certification for that one class, correct? And the second one was for your news class, but you don't get a certification just for Mac OS and just for camera operations It's not
Right.
different certification.
Right, because I call it
Okay.
ABTF certification. Like they have to go through all these competencies to be certified. And then of course you have a different, like a broadcasting class, that's why I changed it, because there's that all those competencies, but plus the new show ones. So yeah, but you know, it actually has a good point, because I'll show you in a minute. I do an end of certification exam, but they have to take all this stuff. I'm actually going to be splitting up that exam this fall, because it used to be like a 60 question exam where they have to go through and answer all these questions. I find that it's actually better to split that up into smaller pieces so they finish it by topic. But yeah, to answer your question, they will get the certification once they finish all of those pieces. Okay. Going to move back to the presentation here. So hopefully that gave you a little sense of understanding of where I'm coming from with the certification. I will make these forms available to us here. I think most of us, Tom, are in that Georgia broadcast group. That might be something that a good place, or what do you think?
Yeah, if you send them to me, we're going to create a Camp TNI folder on the Tyga drive.
Awesome. Great. Okay. So here's one thing to focus on. When you're doing these certifications, these certification trainings, right? The topics that we talked about that are within those trainings, keep it hands-on as much as possible. I know this picture here, you get nervous a little bit looking at it because the camera's tilted way back and they're trying to put it on the tripod, but you've got to give them a safe space to practice with this stuff. You want them to practice with the equipment in front of you versus being out in the field where they're just guessing. So it's better if you do it hands-on, you focus on one competency that day. Because I feel like for me, when I was first starting the certification, I would just overload them with information and content, and they wouldn't really remember a whole lot of what I was saying. So I just focused on, okay, today we're doing camera operation. You're going to put a camera on a tripod today, and you're going to learn about pan, tilt, and zoom. And that's it. And we're going to make sure everybody gets that. Hey, for me, if I can get through a 50-minute session and everybody in my class now knows how to put a camera on a tripod, I think I won for that day, even that week. That's big for me. So keep it hands-on and make sure they get it. You know, you want to walk around to those groups and make sure they get it. When you do this, rotate through those stations that you set up, right? So my class, I sort of split them up in groups of 2 or 3. And I give them a task, and I make sure they understand it. Look at that. This picture really makes me happy. You know why? Because they actually are using the base plate. It just makes me feel really good. They're using the base plate and they're screwing it on with that little piece and that screw in the middle. But rotate through those stations and have them demonstrate that for you, that you just taught them, right? So you might walk up to that group and that group will say, "Oh, we're all done." "Okay, great, Tim. I want you to show me that you know how to do it," right? So that way you can watch them do it. And of course, the entire group is watching. It just reinforces the concept. And then let students explore. Here's something I tried this year that was really different, that I hadn't tried before, that I think worked really well. You know, when we're teaching our software, right, Premiere Pro or Final Cut or whatever we use, a lot of times we like to teach it with the software in front of them, right? So they're looking at the software, the interface, and then you're demoing it on your screen. How many of us do that, right? A lot of us do that. And that's great. Keep doing that. But one day, what I want you to do is take away the screens from them. Don't let them use that actual interface. Your interface, whether it's Final Cut or it's Premiere, they have, Adobe and Apple have very extensive support articles and a support website that helps people through. I know a lot of us have gone through and look through those support articles when you get an error message or whatever. And so what I have them do in this particular slide, if you can look up on the projector right behind where it says students, that's actually a screenshot of the interface. I've put multicolored arrows there pointing to each interface element. And I told them, I said, all the answers you can find for this activity is going to be on the Apple support website where it says Final Cut Pro User Guide. And so then what helps them with that is they get really comfortable with using the support site, which is huge, because whenever they see that error message, they're like, "Mr. Garrett, what do I do?" I'm like, "Well, what did the error message say?" You know, like somebody tells me, "Oh, it doesn't work." Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. What is the error message? And the error message gives you a code for a reason. Go to the support website. They've got almost every code explained and written out. And once I got them comfortable with that, I mean, man, they were just soaring. once they started really editing, because they understood how all that worked. So let your students explore a little bit. You know, you don't have to give them everything. Just say, hey, this is our interface. I want you to figure this piece out today. Who's the first one that can figure this little piece out? Like, actually turn this into more of a competition, turn this into a timed activity where you're not always up in the front just like throwing content at them. Okay, so we're nearing sort of towards the end of the certification here. The certification exam, test their knowledge until 100% is achieved. This is big. So for me, and again, I told y'all that I was changing this, but this year I had the entire certification, all the topics, I had it all built in a Google form, and I will present that now. Okay, hopefully we can all see this. Good. Okay, so we got our spring 2020 AVTF certification exam. All right, and of course they put their name in and all that. But look at this. So we go through Mac basics, just like those topics. I take screenshots. What is it? Name this interface element. Name this, the toolbar up there. Name that interface element. What is this? That's the desktop, right? So I go through all of these things with them. And you might think, man, this looks like a long test, right? But this test, all these questions are very specific to what we do. Like, I need them to understand what RAM does in a computer, because that directly affects how smooth their editing process is going to be. What's a server? You know, all this stuff. Look at this, DSLR. What do those different modes mean? Pan, tilt, zoom. I can share this with you, make it as easy as possible. Look at this. Here's a great question. When inserting an SD card, how do you know you're inserting it the right way? That's a great one, because, and the answer for that one is you feel a little bounce, right? Because when you feel that resistance, you stop pushing. But I have gotten those pliers out and actually had to extract an SD card. Anybody else had to do that? It's not fun, but it's definitely a learning experience for that student. So I can share all this with you, but this is a 60 question exam that I went through, and this was very visual, right? I had them under, like, what's color temperature? Let's look at what that is. Different lighting setups. And again, I'll share it with you, but the main point of this is, number one, they see all the content again, right? And of course, they're not going to get 100% at the end, right? And so what the key for me is test until they get 100%, right? And you're like, well, what does that mean? That means if they get a 98%, they take it all over again. And that's what I told them. Now, I didn't tell them that until they took it the first time. So I delivered the test. I said, today we're doing a certification exam. Boom, you have 50 minutes, right? And so when they finished it, they sat there, then the whole class was done. Then I said, okay, if you didn't get 100%, you're going to take it all over again. Well, what if I just missed one question? You're going to take it all over again. The point of doing that is they see all that content one more time. And then when they finally get that 100%, they feel like they've achieved something. Now, I'm trying to figure out this year, you know, that worked great for me last year. One thing that I had them do was I let, you know, of course, every one of our topics, I had them take notes, and that was sort of a graded daily grade. They took notes on everything. I told them on test day, hey, it's open note, by the way. Open note, open resource. Because I tell them, like, look, I'm not a math class. I'm not a science class. In the video production industry, we all expect you to be resourceful. We don't expect you to be a robot and being able to recite everything. If you don't know the answer, find the answer, right? And so I let them use all their notes, use all the tools they can to look up these answers, and they still don't get 100, I promise you. The first time they miss one, they miss two, they take it all again. Imagine them seeing all of that certification content twice after you've already taught it to them. I feel like at that point, they get it. And it's really, really worked well. One thing this year I'm going to do is I'm going to actually split that certification exam up and have them do, have the Mac Basics piece as just like a little quiz version of it. And I'm not going to make them do it 100% there. I'll make them do 100% at the end, but I'm just going to give it to them there once we finish that topic. It kind of solidifies that piece. Any questions about the certification exam?
So, Zach, are you going to give it to them twice? Like the first, say a student makes a 90 on Mac Basics. Okay, you make a 90 that day. But on your certification exam, oh, I made a 90. No, you're redoing it all over again. Correct. So are you giving them the whole certification test on top of Basics?
Yes. So as soon as I'm done with the Mac Basics and we move into camera operation, each one of those has a small little quiz, which is going to be I'm not reinventing the wheel. It's going to be the same questions, just in the Mac basics and the camera operation. They'll just take that once just to see it. That'll be their grade for that. But then the certification exam, they'll have to get 100%. And when they push back a little bit and they say, but I have a 98, it's fine. And I'm like, okay, so you're going to be 98% certified on safety. So 2% of the time you're going to make unsafe decisions. No, sir. Retake it, right? And so that normally kind of shuts that down. And here's the thing is too, they're going to get 100 on it eventually, whether they take it 3 times or 6 times. One kid, it was 6 times it took him to get 100, but nobody passed 6 times, right? But hey, that student saw the entire test 6 times, right? So it's kind of a great thing for them to do. Now with the Google Forms, you can be creative and you can say, you can turn off like show the correct answer. You can just have it show you just the wrong ones. And so they have to actually go back and think about it, not write down all the answers and retake it. But it's whatever you feel like is important to you. For me, what's important is that they take the test fully and they get that 100%. And if it takes them 2 times, which on average it does at least twice, they've seen all the content twice. So that's what's big for me. Okay, so going back to the presentation here. Okay, so again, you're testing their knowledge until 100% is achieved. And I just showed you the demo. Okay, so they're certified. What happens next, right? They've gotten certified, they have 100%. Here's the deal. You're gonna have to proceed and go forward with your projects that you've already decided you're doing that year, right? You're gonna have to go ahead and get started because now you're 3 weeks in and you haven't done any real projects yet. So you probably need to go ahead and jump on that. You're gonna have kids that are not done with certification. That's fine. What I have them do is they still listen to me when I deliver those projects, deliver the instructions for those projects, the first project we're doing, and that I make them just take the certification exam home. I don't lock it down or whatever. Now, of course, they'll go home and probably take screenshots of it and get really manipulative and creative on getting all the answers. But hey, guess what? They're doing all that in your exam and they're focusing on making sure they select the right answer. They're taking the test over. It's fine. That's my whole thing about it. It's like, it's fine. I don't care what they do. They'll get the certification exam done. They've seen all the content multiple times. That's what's important to me, not necessarily being a drone and knowing all the right answers. So, so there's that. Okay, so now they're certified. You move on with your next projects. But what do they get with certification? One thing I tell them is like it's not just a key that opens up all these projects, but what else does it get for them? Okay. Here's what they get. One of the first things they get is they get a press pass from me, and they love those things. I mean, it's so easy for us to make. They wear those things to pride, don't they? And so they get a little press pass with their picture on it. We have water bottles. A parent donated that to us, and these are really kind of inexpensive water bottles that they just threw a logo on. I mean, our kids love swag stuff. Look at this. This was some of our kids. If you watch our show, you might recognize a couple of them. They get those nice polos. They get a polo shirt. This is actually very specifically what we call the certification pin. And so this is actually a pin that we bought online. If you go to Wizard Pins, and I'll put that, I guess I can put that in the chat, but anybody used Wizard Pins before? Okay, I put it in the chat here. Wizardpins.com. They're really great service. You just throw your logo up there. I paid $200 out of my budget, and I got, I think it was 100 pins, right? And so my kids just ate that up. I mean, they loved wearing those pins. Now for us, we wear military uniforms, so pins and insignia for us is probably a little bit more important. But if you get them a polo, tell them to put that pin on their collar, because it looks, I mean, it definitely looks like a piece of shine there that they like to strut around with. So they get that certification pin as well. And of course, any of the swag that we get with our long sleeves or whatever. Now, of course, your schools might have different policies on if they allow you to sell that or whatever. I try to get as much fundraising done as possible and use as much of my budget as I can to give them that free stuff. Because the reason why I want to do that is not only do they get to feel pride for being certified, but they also get to rep my program all around the school and at home so it's a big deal for them. Okay, and this is sort of the last thing, recertification. Keep best practices fresh each semester. So I don't tell them this until maybe November, but I tell them that they will need to be recertified in the beginning of the semester. Now, if you're on a block schedule, you might get, some of your kids might leave, and so maybe you recertify in the middle of a semester. It's up to you. Here's the thing. When you recertify, it's kind of your choice. I've done both. I've done give them the same exam over and just make them see all that content, and let's go through everything again to make sure you understand it. Maybe spend a day just popping in on those topics, because sometimes they forget, because sometimes these kids that got 100, they might still be spinning that camera like a merry-go-round on top of that tripod, right? So have them take that exam again so they can see all that content, and then you can recertify them. Another thing I've done is add additional things in there. We're humans, right? We're always going to forget a few things. Like, for example, there was a thing about what mode to put the camera on that I didn't put in there originally, that you saw in there, but I snuck it back in there. I forgot that question. And so there's some new questions that I asked them at that recertification that we've already talked about that semester. So that certification exam is sort of a living, breathing document, and it's going to get really big, really full of all the information that you want your kids to know, and you're just going to keep adding to it, especially when your video editing software updates, your Premiere Pro and Final Cut. I mean, I remember a few years ago when Final Cut Pro updated, and I had to throw almost everything out because all the buttons were different. Everything was different. So it's just something to think about when you're updating those certification exams. Okay, so we've gone through basically everything that we were meant to go through. I finished it earlier than I thought I would, which is great because we all love a little extra lunch break, don't we? But we've gone through all these pieces, right? We've figured out what we use for our training and safety at the beginning of the semester. We talked about how we work towards certification. We go through those topics, what the certification exam looks like, what they get after certification. And let me just give you a little piece on this. When they get certified, I'm not just I'm not throwing all this swag at them at once, right? I'll give it to them sort of gradually as we go in the semester. Like they finish a project and here's something else we get. But the certification exam also, I tell them that when you get into any industry, you're going to have to get certified in something. You'll have to be certified in either a software and either a specific movement that you have to do with depending on the industry. Even if they don't go into video, they're going to have to understand how to do their job. And this is job training. And so we brand that as training. It's a training time, and they get certified at the end. And they should carry that with pride, because now they can produce projects as certified students. So that's what's really important. Okay, I think that is everything. Questions? What do y'all got? Tom, do we have anything in the chat? Okay. Any questions on certification? I'm going to stop presenting.
Hey, Zach, I've got a question on your students.
What you got?
And by the way, I apologize for me yawning. I wasn't bored. I have a newborn at home. So
congratulations.
Thanks a lot. That's what Tom and Adam were hammering me about earlier. I've been to your campus before. It's been years, but I remember how impressed I was with the cadets, their discipline and their courtesy and things of that nature. Now, I mean, they're kids though. In classroom, I'm guessing you probably face the same type of hurdles we do with motivation, but I'm wondering, is it a kids or kids thing, or do you have to get past things like, well, they're cadets, so they're having to focus on like science and math, and they're not prioritizing? What's it like teaching cadets in a CTAE environment?
Yeah, I always feel like I'm blessed teaching at a military school because we have a few extra tools in our tool belt to motivate our kids. We can use certain exercises and calisthenics to really get them moving. But I think for me, I asked them in the very beginning when we introduced the class to the students in that first week, and we talk about, why are we in here? Why do you want to be in here? And we really focus on what is possible in video production. I try to separate sort of the daunting task of learning how to be a filmmaker and a video editor to like, what's the end result, right? I mean, you see these YouTubers making all this money. You see people doing, the commercials that they enjoy, all the content on Snapchat and TikTok and all that stuff. I mean, people are making money. And so I try to connect it with that. I think a lot of it's the kids are kids thing though, John, because I still have students in my class that are not motivated. And even with the extra tools that we have, I think for me, I've found real success in starting with the relationship with that student, working with them individually. Sometimes if they're not feeling like they're super motivated, I pull them aside, be like, "Hey, is this really something that you're wanting to do? Is this something that you are passionate about?" And if they say no, then I say, "Well, what are you passionate about?" And then I try to find something in there to connect it back to video. Well, you can do that, and you can be great in video as well. One thing, if I get athletes in my class and they're really passionate about athletics, I ask them, who's going to make your highlight reel, right? And if they don't know anybody, I'm going to say, well, looks like you are. So that's something to think about too. So I always try to find a way to connect back to video because, I mean, whether or not they know it or appreciate it, they consume hours on hours of video every day on all these different platforms. And so I try to connect it to real life scenarios. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot for that.
Okay. Yeah, man.
Hey, Zach, just kind of going off that same thing, because a lot of, going through the certification, I'm guessing, they'll work in groups. I mean, this is a group oriented kind of thing. I mean, people have to help each other. How do you kind of handle sometimes the student don't want to carry their weight, and then you get other students, oh, I want to change group, so and so is not doing their thing, and I've peer grading before, but how do you handle something like that when one group member maybe not pulling their weight or something of that nature?
Absolutely. I'm going to go off script here, Tom, and actually pull something from another presentation I'm doing maybe tomorrow or Wednesday. It's called Managing a Student News Team. And it's something that I use that helps. It's across all of my classes. It's called a performance evaluation. And I'm sure all of us know what that is as professionals. But if I get a student that's not pulling their weight in a simple, me pulling them aside is not going to fix it, I try to go the next level. I mean, the thing for me is pulling a student aside, taking the audience away, always, or at least 9 times out of 10, keeps it real with me and the student. We can have a frank conversation, see what's going on, and we can normally fix it and get through it. But let me pull this document up and I'll show you what it is. The performance evaluation, what I tell them is this is something that they will experience in the real world, right? I compare it everything to the real world. This is something you're going to experience when you have a real job. Your performance is going to be evaluated. And so what I'll do is if that student is not pulling their weight and kind of pulling their group down, what I'll do is I'll schedule a meeting with them. I won't say what it's about. Just say, hey, we're going to meet, talk about this for a little bit. And then I'll pull out this performance evaluation. Now, every student gets one. They get evaluated sort of, I try to say it every month or so, but I don't ever get to it every month. It's like whenever I can. Y'all know how that is, every 6 weeks. But let me pull this. Let me share my screen. Okay. Y'all see that? Is that coming through there? I will zoom in here. Maybe I'll come in a little bit. Okay, so here's some of the stuff I look for in the performance evaluation. I have particular pieces in here that I want them to focus their energy on. Do you meet deadlines? Are you respectful to fellow students? Do you actively participate? I mean, we tell our students all the time that they need to be engaged and they need to be working hard in our class, but not all of them know what working hard means. We have to quantify that. And so I think for me, this has been the best tool for quantifying what it means to be a contributing member of a team. I can also share this with Tom. I think some of this I've shared before, but he's gonna create a new folder for us, and we're gonna share it all in there. You'll have all access to all this. And if you want more in depth about managing your students on a team level, Tom, I don't know when you have my presentation scheduled. It moved around a little bit. So do you remember when that presentation is? Is it tomorrow or Wednesday?
Tomorrow is your news show.
Managing the news team. Yeah. Okay. And I'll talk a lot about managing performance and keeping them motivated and stuff like that. But does this help answer some of that? Here's some more things down here. Initiative at the bottom, that's a big one. Does a student show initiative by offering ideas and suggestions while taking charge of projects before others do? That's a big one, right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually looked up what initiative meant. Like, what was the dictionary definition so I could quantify it? Because I was like, I really don't. I mean, like stepping up, I don't know. So I just looked up the definition and then I quantified it with point values there. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a bulldog and run over people with your ideas, but are you able to take charge of a piece of that project? Are you able to take charge of the whole thing? I mean, what are you doing? What are you taking initiative with? And that normally sets a lot of them straight. The ones that I just can't get set straight, I have to meet with the counselor with them and just try to figure out, hey, maybe this class is not meant for you, and that's fine. There's other ones that you can join. Thanks for the question, David. Anybody else? What else we got? It's almost lunchtime.
Hey, Zach, do you go over like procedures in your classroom, basically just like how your class functions, like what to do whenever you were speaking or during like different activities? What do you do in that case? And I see a lot of equipment training, but I didn't know if you did that too.
So almost like professional courtesy training is
Yes.
like how to, yeah. So, and this is also a lot of this overlaps. So I'm going to let me pull up that other slide. I'm not going to give too much of it away, but it's a very particular slide I had in tomorrow's presentation, which I'll show you. We talk about expectations at the beginning of the class.
Okay.
And so my expectations here are, let me see if I can share this. Okay. Hopefully you can see that.
I can.
And so these are posted in the classroom. They sign the document acknowledging they've read them. I do a popcorn type environment where they read each line to each other and we talk about what each of these mean. Like, what does it mean to respect the faculty, staff, cadets, visitors, and equipment, right? What does it mean to use professional language? And so we talk about all these things. And of course, I run it through with them in the beginning that our class for the next 3 weeks is going to look different than it is for the rest of the year, right? The first 3 weeks is very heavy in training. We're going to be doing some hands-on stuff. There's going to be a time for you to listen. And so that it all goes back to their production grade that is tied to that performance evaluation that I say, hey, look, if I have to call on you, I've just got a little roster up here with your name on it. And they know when that pen gets up, I mean, I'm just taking notes, right? And so I try to tell them your performance in the class is directly tied to your grade, and that includes being respectful when people are talking and presenting, and not messing around in the groups. I tell them also a lot too that if they're in a group environment and they're joking around, playing games, kind of roughhousing over there, I mean, that's a safety violation.
Right.
They are endangering each other and the equipment, and I'm not going to have it. And so they'll have to sit out for a safety violation. I kind of I sort of put a chair in the corner and they just have to sit over there because I'm not going to have it. And that's just, we set those expectations in the beginning. And I also tell them, I say, hey, look, we are a team here and we are all learning together and we're going to get through this and you're going to make these awesome videos. And I always try to focus on the end result. This is what you're going to be like at the end. You're going to be able to do all this stuff. You just got to listen. You've got to be attentive and you have to be respectful. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Awesome.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, man. What else we got, guys?
Zach, when you were talking about your certification, you were talking about rotating them through stations.
Yes.
Like what stations? Like I know one would be attaching a camera to the tripod, but like what other stations do you use per se?
For that particular activity, the rotating through the stations, like if we're doing the camera operation setup that day, I don't have all the same tripods. Some of mine are different. I have some of my cameras are different. And so I just rotate them through to make sure they're cross-trained in all the tripods because they're not guaranteed to get the same tripod every time. I'm trying to get them all uniform. But what I'll do is if, like, for some of the stuff, I do have the same equipment for like the pan, tilt, zoom and everything. And so what I'll do is we'll rotate through. At least maybe they're not rotating around in stations, but each station just accommodates more students, and I'll have them rotate people taking charge of that, making sure they can pan, tilt, and zoom. And then I'll come over to them and say, all right, give me a pan. I'll say pan left or, tilt up, and just to make sure they understand what that is, because then when they're actually a real camera operator, I'm going to need them to know. And you'll find it even at a military school where we have to know cadence and they have to march to a drum and they have to know their left and right. Students don't know their left from their right. They really need training on it, and it's not punitive. It's just like it's just a coordination thing. I mean, we're teaching 17-year-olds. I mean, with our oldest cadets, 17 or 18-year-olds, how to march, and we'll say put your left foot up or put your left heel down, and they're like having trouble because they've never been like told specifically what, like, this is your left heel. Like, you have to be very intentional with that. So it just depends a lot on the activity, though. We'll rotate through the students and within those stations, or the stations will be different. Sometimes I have like one of the stations I had was like setting up equipment for a production. So if it's a 2-camera shoot versus a 1-camera shoot with lights, and so each station will have like a different objective. Like, you have to set this up and then tear it down so they can understand what that is, and they rotate through. They spend about 10 minutes in each station. But they love that a lot because it keeps them going. And then, I mean, the class time zooms by and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize class is over. I'm like, yeah, that's what happens when you're having fun.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. Anything else?
Yeah, real quick. Do anybody else use or go through like Georgia Best? So I know, like, for us here at LCCA in Liberty County, our first 3 weeks is really, a lot of it is all spent on workplace ethics, and we enforce that day in, day out, every day, the entire time they're in the class, and we give them a weekly grade. And these grades, the workplace ethics grade it's 25% of their whole overall grade. I don't know if anybody else uses that or not. I have, I have some of the stuff here, Tom, if you want me to send it to you, and then, you guys can kind of take a look at it, but it's got score sheets and all that stuff to where, you just kind of, like, all that stuff that you were just covering there, Zach. A lot of this stuff is in here. So, they have like 10 categories, and each of those categories is a total of 3 points for the entire week. And then as you watch that performance of that student, so like attendance, for example, they miss a day of class, especially when you're working in production teams. So these guys are working in groups and they're relied upon to get their part of that work done. They don't show up, it hurts the entire group, But how they are dressed, their appearance, professional image, their attitude on a daily basis, character, discipline, just a whole bunch of different things. And it's already got the score points, just kind of set up and everything. But Tom, I'll email that to you, and if you guys wanted to kind of take a look at it and stuff, though.
That'd be really for us. That'd be really useful. Thanks so much for that.
Yeah, no problem.
I think it's all about what do you want your students to be able to do after that training period, however long it is. Do you want to walk into the class and hand hold them through the editing all the time, or do you want to walk into class and have the students say, Mr. Garrett, we're ready to go. We need the equipment. We need this. Can we get started on the max? I mean, that's what I want. And that's after the certification thing this year that I did, after I branded it like that, it just, I mean, they were always on top of it because it helped get us through that training period. And then once we got into projects and production, they were moving. But workplace ethics, though, I mean, that's huge. That's why, I mean, I called it professional courtesy with my new show class, and I'm probably going to move that professional courtesy into the ABTF classes. We talk a lot about professional courtesy because they're dealing with like talent, the people that are in the school, and administrators, and people they're interviewing. Sometimes my kids will schedule an interview, and then they'll be like, oh, well, we ended up not needing that interview, but then they never emailed that administrator. So the administrator was waiting and they had that block of time open for that student. I'm like, you can't just do that. But they don't understand that. They think, oh, well, if I don't need it, it's fine. It's like, no, that you have to, I mean, we have to teach them these things because they don't know. And they're learning that in our class, which I think is the coolest piece. about all this.
Yeah, and along with the workplace ethics, so at the end of the quarter, because they have to maintain, as long as they maintain a certain point value, basically. So on average, they have to have like a 25 out of 30, for their final grade, and they get certified. And a lot of these businesses out here, they know exactly what the Georgia Best certifications are, and these kids have that certification that they can add, or include, along with their applications and their resumes and all that stuff too. So it talk about certifications and give them something to shoot for. A lot of these kids nowadays don't get those types of certifications. So just having that.
Right. Well, that would be awesome if you could share that. That's
Yeah.
big, because that's like a real industry certification. Mine's just a made up thing that I did within my class, but we find that students don't realize that once they've gone through our training that they've actually accomplished something. They now know how to use production equipment safely, correctly, and that's a big deal because a lot of their peers don't. They think they know how to use a camera, but you give them a camera and a tripod and they're like, I don't know. Does this just sit on here? They don't know. Right. And so that, for me, adding that certification at the end gave them something to work towards, just like they're doing that project every few weeks. They're working towards the completion of that project. They're working towards something. So it just really helped me doing the certification. And be honest, guys, I didn't have anybody ask me to print one of those things out for them, but they all felt good being certified at the end. So really the overhead work is minimal. It's just organizing what are your competencies that they have to know by the time you start your projects. Because I don't know about y'all, but in my class, my AVTF classes are all, we go from project to project to project with reflections built in there. Once they're trained, they hit the ground running. So that's what really helps us, is getting them certified first. We've got a few minutes left. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. And if not, don't feel like you have to hang around if you're hungry for lunch. I know I am, but Tom, is there anything we're missing or we need to look at, or any closing parting advice?
No, just that your session tomorrow is the Managing the Student-Driven News show, and then on Wednesday is project delivery and assessment. Yeah,
and those will be good too, because I have some different content to show y'all about like managing your news show team, like how to breaking down the different positions they're in and working on motivation with those. And of course, the project delivery is more of an ABTF thing, where I sort of brand my projects, kind of like certification. I have a form for them to follow, and it kind of guides them through their project. So if that's something y'all are interested in, please hop in at those sessions. I think same time tomorrow on Wednesday, right?
Correct. 11 o'clock for both.
Awesome.
Any other questions before we get out of here?
Thank y'all so much. Tom, thank you.
Zach, I was going to ask you, I can't believe you're wanting to go back to school and have no sports this fall.
Yeah. If anybody doesn't know, yeah, if anybody doesn't read the paper, Riverside was the first school in Georgia to cancel football and cross country. It was a big